On December 12, 2019, Malaysia further delineated the extended continental shelf boundaries, directly protesting Chinese claims in the South China Sea. Malaysia submitted information to the United Nations Commission on Continental Boundary which states its right to continental shelf that exceeds 200 nautical miles. In accordance with the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea (UNCLOS), Malaysia first submitted information to the Commission about the expanded continental shelf in the South China Sea in 2009, when it was submitted jointly with Vietnam. Malaysia's new submission almost doubled the continental shelf reach north of the original Malaysian Malaysian mapping. Both Malaysian submissions deny that the Spratly Islands or Paracel made their own continental shelves in the center of the South China Sea. The People's Republic of China (PRC), however, recognized the continental shelf based on these features, which was rejected by the Permanent Arbitration Court (PCA) in its 2016 ruling in the Philippines, China, South China Sea Arbitration. Thus, the Malaysian shipment on December 12 was built on the South China Sea Arbitration by recognizing only the territorial sea of the Spratly Island features and not the Exclusive Economic Zone (EEZ). Around the feature, the PRC responded to the December 12 submission in Malaysia by saying that the submission seriously violates China's sovereignty, sovereign rights and jurisdiction in the South China Sea. China reaffirms its recognition of EEZ based on the islands in the South China Sea and historic China. A separate diplomatic dispute between Indonesia and China began 2 weeks later. On December 30, Indonesia said that Chinese ships carried out sea violations to Indonesia EEZ. A Chinese Coast Guard ship, together with a Chinese fishing vessel, was allegedly refused to leave Indonesia's EEZ from the Natuna Islands. Video appeared on Indonesian television about a bridge-to-bridge radio exchange between Indonesian and Chinese ships. The Indonesian government summoned the Chinese ambassador to protest the violation of China. China does not assert sovereignty over Indonesia's occupied Natuna, which lies just south of China's 9 Lines claim in the South China Sea. However, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Zheng Shuang said, both China and Indonesia have normal fishing activities in offshore Natuna waters. In response, the Indonesian Foreign Ministry stated that China's claims based on past fishing activities had no legal basis, and that Indonesia would never recognize China's 9-line for violating UNCLOS. Indonesia is not the plaintiff over the islands of the Spratly Islands, and Jakarta has noted that it does not have overlapping jurisdictions with Beijing. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs also cited the 2016 South China Sea Arbitration ruling that defeated the PRC legal arguments based on historic fishing rights. China reiterated its position that the PCA ruling was illegal, null and void, together. Malaysia and Indonesia's dependence on South China Sea arbitration signify an increasing desire for regional prosecutors to advocate a sharp gaze-setting principles based on legal precedents, in response to the PRC's aggressiveness in the South China Sea. Using the South China Sea arbitration to limit Chinese behavior is something the Philippines cannot or does not want to do under President Rodrigo Duterte. On December 13, U.S. Navy Pacific Fleet Commander Admiral John Aquilino told reporters in Bangkok that China's territorial recognition in the South China Sea was protesting by neighboring countries. He asked China to comply with international law and respect the rights of other countries in the South China Sea. On December 17, China commissioned its first indigenous aircraft carrier, Shandong. In Hainan, Chinese President Xi Jinping oversees the ceremony in Sanya in Hainan Province in the South China Sea. The paper managed by the PRC Global Times government noted that China was the first Asian country to build an aircraft carrier that was designed for itself since World War II. Shandong can carry 36 J-15 warplanes. Compared to 24 warplanes in Liaoning, China built Soviet-only and other aircraft carriers. Despite having a similar ski-jump flight deck and conventional thrusts such as Liaoning, Shandong has more sophisticated electronic devices and improved command and control systems, according to the Global Times. The Chinese aircraft carrier program has grown rapidly over the past decade. China commissioned Liaoning in 2012 and began construction of Shandong in 2013. Analysts expect China to complete construction on its third aircraft carrier later this year. The third carrier could be the first in China to have a flat flight deck and slingshot launch system, more analogous to the U.S. carrier. China immediately used Shandong for use by sailing through the Taiwan Strait on December 26. Shandong had previously crossed the strait on its way to Hainan on November 17, traced by U.S. and Japanese warships. The December 26 Taiwan transit coincided with the anniversary of the PRC founder, Mao Zedong, and took place 2 weeks before Taiwan's presidential election on January 11. Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen is part of the pro-sovereignty Democratic Progressive Party and votes about 30 points ahead of his Kuomintang rival, Han Kuo-yu, who supports closer ties with Beijing. Responding to the December 26 strait transit, President Tsai's office called on Beijing to respect peace and stability across the strait. On the diplomat, J. Tristan Terriella wrote that Philippine President Duterte stressed Coast Guard diplomacy, both to enhance the security of the maritime Philippines and to enhance diplomatic relations with foreign powers. Terriella noted that the Duterte administration had a special preference for the Philippine Coast Guard (PCG), increasing the size of its budget and personnel. PCG now has 23,000 personnel, compared to 14,000 active duty sailors in the Philippine Navy. PCG also functions as a ship for security cooperation. Manila has sent PCG officers to study and train in the United States, China, Sweden and Japan. In 2019, the United States Coast Guard participated in 2 maritime exercises with PCG, while Japan has sent a dozen patrol boats to PCG over the past 5 years. Terriella believes that this PCG investment is not to support the Philippine gray zone tactic. In contrast, Terriella argues, Manila's reliance on PCG reduces the risk of harm in the South China Sea by using white ships to protect 7,000 islands in the Philippines in a non-escalating way.